Thank you for coming today to the House Republican Caucus conference here in the State House, in the historic State House, regarding transportation funding in the state of Maryland. We're very concerned about this legislation as it's proceeding through this process, and we want to share with you some of our thoughts today on that. The governor submitted a bill, it's House Bill 1515, which is a very high number and a very late filed bill. And for such a weighty matter that could impact people's lives directly and our state's economy directly, we believe that this should have been filed more timely and should have been given more due diligence. We're always talking about the importance of our transportation infrastructure. The governor waited until the very last minute to introduce this complicated scheme to raise gas taxes and increase people's cost of living in the state. If Maryland's transportation infrastructure truly was one of the governor's priorities, he would have been working on this proposal over the interim. As late as early January, I was at a conference with people who represent the presiding officers and the administration, and the governor was still non-committal and well into the legislative session, non-committal on his position on raising transportation funding, and now we get this complicated piece of legislation very late in the session. Rather than touring the country to gain political points, he should have been here doing the hard work of the citizens of this state. That's what they deserve. If it were a priority, take a break from the Sunday talk show circuit and get around to appointing a Secretary of Transportation in this state, which he has failed to do. In years past, the governor has again taken the reflexive action of increasing Maryland citizens' taxes by pushing for a gas tax increase that will remove over $2 billion from their wallets over the next 6 years. Let me repeat that, over $2 billion from the taxpayers of Maryland over the next 6 years. So this bill is now before us. Our caucus will continue to fight for the most frequently forgotten interest group in Annapolis, and that is Maryland's taxpayers, beleaguered taxpayers, I might add. I'd now like you to hear from some of our very well-spoken and well-thought-out caucus members on the specifics of our thoughts on this bill. And first we'll go to Delegate Ron George from the capital city of Annapolis. George.
Thank you so much. Delegate Ron George, I want to put this in a historical context for you. This is the first time in history of this state that a tax has been indexed to inflation. It is both the first time and perhaps the worst time for the governor and the General Assembly to foist this onto our Maryland citizens. Indexing makes tax automatically increase without any input from the General Assembly. It eliminates the authority of the General Assembly to increase or reduce this tax as it sets increases on autopilot. The gas tax will be Governor O'Malley's legacy, continuing to increase long after he has moved beyond the State House. His legacy of the eternal gas tax will continue to haunt Maryland motorists for many, many decades to come. Thank you. Turn it over to Andy Serafini.
Thank you, Delegate Andrew Serafini from Western Maryland. As Delegate George said, and I believe you have a worksheet that was passed out to you, was done by Delegate Hsu and confirmed by the Department of Legislative Services. If we look at the current rate and simply use a 2.5% inflation rate, you can see that the total tax on this could increase by as much as 88% by fiscal year 2017. And that means that Marylanders could be paying 44 cents more per gallon in Maryland taxes alone. These rates could skyrocket, they could skyrocket, they could double, triple. Listen, if you go back and check the math, when President Obama came into office, gas was under $2 a gallon. We've seen it spike over $4 a gallon. Worldwide production is only limited, but worldwide demand is growing as we see emerging markets in China and in other areas demand for it. We also know the uncertainty and the unstableness of Iran and the Middle East. As any of those things happen, those prices could double and triple, and yet there are no provisions in this that would ratchet it back. It can only go up. And so even a short, reflexive jump in prices would lock these prices in with no ability if gas prices did come back down to do that. Currently, we know, according to AAA, Marylanders are spending 7.2% of their income on gasoline. And gasoline prices touch everything. It's not just going to be at the pump. It's going to be when you go to the grocery store. It's going to be when you go to any place of business. In my business, when prices spiked a couple years ago, the trash company put a fuel surcharge on. UPS put a fuel surcharge on this. We're going to pay for this tax multiple times over. The fact that it impacts diesel will also drive diesel, which is how most of our goods and services are delivered to us. So this is far-ranging. It's interesting that it's indexed, and it's indexed to inflation. Well, as we add to the price of gas, it's going to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's going to be exponential growth because we, in fact, are going to add to inflation that Marylanders are going to experience. Last thing I'll say, wages have not increased because this is a jobless recovery, and yet the cost of living as it goes up puts people, the individuals, in a much more difficult stance. I'm going to ask Delegate Sue Allman to come behind me and add to this conversation further. Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Sue Allman from Baltimore County. This bill, House Bill 1515, does nothing to protect the Transportation Trust Fund from being raided. It requires 3/5 of any standing committee to raid the Transportation Trust Fund. 3/5 majority is no challenge, considering the makeup of their committees and the gamesmanship that can be played. As we've said before, this bill indexes an excise tax on inflation. We're going to hit inflation, and this has it automatically goes up, and there's no stopping it. There's no cap. It goes on year after year. This bill also establishes a 1% tax on the retail price of gasoline collected at the wholesale level. This new tax increases to 2% in January 2015, and then again 3% on July 2015. If the federal government fails to authorize an online sales tax collection, this tax could increase to 4% in January of 16 and 5% in July of 2016. The bottom line, this bill, House Bill 1515, raises a massive amount of taxes on our citizens, and there's nothing to guarantee that the money that goes for these taxes will end up in our Transportation Trust Fund. Thank you.
The bottom line on this tax bill is that it will double gas taxes within 5 years. Double. Almost a 100% increase. This bill is complicated by design. It's designed to confuse people, but at the end of the day, it's almost a 100% tax increase over 5 years. There are two parts that you need to understand about this bill. It automatically will increase gas taxes due to inflation, and it will apply the sales tax to the most volatile commodity on the American market, gasoline. Those two things in conjunction will be a double whammy, a double punch to the gut of the Maryland taxpayer. This will be one of the biggest tax increases in Maryland history, of almost $4 billion. That money is going to come out of our economy. The problem with this bill is it puts the cart before the horse. We've done nothing to align this tax increase with the needs of our taxpayers. It's going to cost $4 billion to build the Purple Line, Red Line. But this bill does nothing for road transportation. Only 8% of all Marylanders use mass transit, and yet we are being asked to pay higher gas taxes to subsidize them. 88% of us use roads. It's ironic that in this bill they cap how much a bus fare can go up, but there's no cap on how much the gas tax can go up. As time goes on, we will draw out more of this bill for taxpayers to know about. But the bottom line, it puts taxes on autopilot. It locks us out of the cockpit because we can do nothing to stop them. And it's a 1-2 punch, a double whammy that doubles this gas tax over 5 years. Thank you.
I'm Nancy Stocksdale from Carroll County, and I'd like to bring this right home to all moms and dads. A constituent of mine that has 4 children who are very active in the school band and in school plays told me that she will not be able to afford to go pick up her kids after school. Normally they ride the school bus, but when they stay after to practice, she has to go get them. She says it's $8 every time I go to school. And she has 4 children, so she has to have a larger car, and there's nothing she can do about it. So it just might be that those kids will not be able to take part in after-school activities or in plays that would enrich their education. So I think that all moms and dads will be affected, and that is really a terrible thing to do to our kids. Thank you.
Tony McConkey. The governor's trying to justify the gas tax by saying there's a crisis in transportation, but it's a crisis of his own creation. In the past, when times were tough, he's raided the fund by $1 trillion, and now that times are good, by $1 billion, now that times are good, rather than put some of the excess revenue in, he's increased spending by $1.4 billion in this budget. Rather than spending that on transportation, he has starved the locals, called it a crisis, and is now demanding the gas tax. We don't have a crisis, it's a crisis of his own creation. Thank you.
We'd like to thank you all for being here. I think you've heard the message loud and clear. The minority party in this body says no, we do not need a gas tax. This eternal legacy of an ever-increasing tax is not good for Maryland families, not good for Maryland citizens or Maryland taxpayers.